Welcome to Oracle Eyes. China is gradually revealing its intentions in the Asia-Pacific. The blockade of the island of Taiwan, the exercises to irritate regional actors, were only part of China's strategy. Today, it has become clear that the Chinese Navy's intentions are much broader. In fact, a significant portion of the Chinese Navy's naval assets have surprisingly put to sea in an island region west of Taiwan. This step actually posed a major threat to South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and the Philippines. This is due to the fact that China has been escalating its aggressive maritime activities with a particular focus on the Philippines, which has caused the geopolitical situation in the Asia-Pacific area to become increasingly turbulent in recent days. The Philippines, along with its allies, especially the United States, has responded strongly to these provocations, which have prompted harsh reactions from the Philippines. Warships and submarines belonging to the Chinese Navy have been conducting operations off the coast of the Philippines, while both the Philippine Navy and the United States Navy have elevated their level of alertness in the region. It would appear that the level of tension in the region has once again reached an all-time high. Let's take a look at the most recent incidents that have occurred in the Asia-Pacific region and find out how China is conspiring against the United States of America and its allies, as well as how the United States government is attempting to rein in Beijing. Let's begin with the unexpected naval visit that China made to the island region that is located west of Taiwan. In the vicinity of Penghu Island, a Taiwanese fishing vessel took a number of images of the Type 094 nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine belonging to the Chinese People's Liberation Army Navy. These photographs revealed that the submarine had surfaced at around 5 kilometers in the morning on the previous day. The submarine came to the surface in the Taiwan Strait just to the west of the middle line. It remained immobile and remained on the surface until another Chinese vessel arrived, at which point it proceeded with both of them in the direction of mainland China. A Chinese amphibious cruiser was reportedly patrolling near a disputed area in the South China Sea, where there was a skirmish between Chinese and Philippine Coast Guard soldiers. This information was provided by local media sources. An unidentified People's Liberation Army Navy Type 075 class landing helicopter dock was also observed for the first time in satellite photographs in the South China Sea by a ship observer. These photos were taken in the region. Following that, the cruiser, which weighed 36,000 tons, came to a stop close to Subi Reef, which is a reclaimed territory that is now home to a Chinese military installation. The enormous amphibian was observed the following day in the vicinity of Sabina Shoal. The United States of America intervened in response to a crucial naval maneuver that China was conducting in the vicinity. In a report, officials from the United States Navy stated that they were keeping a close eye on the large warship belonging to China and tracking its every move. China's flat-roofed aircraft has a displacement of 36,000 tons, which is slightly smaller than its American counterpart, the WASP-class LHD of the United States Navy. Additionally, China's aircraft does not come equipped with vertical and short takeoff and landing fighters. The landing of China's largest amphibian in the South China Sea preceded the incident that occurred on Monday at 2nd Thomas Shoal. This event resulted in the serious injury of a Filipino soldier and the damage of multiple ships, making it the most significant confrontation between Manila and Beijing to date. This most recent episode has resulted in an increase in the level of tension at Sabina Shoal, which is the location where China and the United States have come into conflict with one another. Beijing asserts that the waters surrounding Sabina, which are located 72 nautical miles to the northwest of the island of Palawan in the Philippines, are part of Chinese territorial waters as part of its expansive claims in the South China Sea. It is Manila's opinion that the shoal falls within the boundaries of its exclusive economic zone. The conflict at Sabina Shoal began in April, when the flagship of the Philippine Coast Guard, the BRP Teresa Magbanua, anchored off the shoal. Manila asserts that this action was taken in order to obstruct Chinese island reclamation works. Manila's declaration was disregarded by Beijing as nothing more than a hearsay. Because of the presence of Chinese naval personnel, a rising number of cutters have been obscured in the 2 months that have passed since Teresa Magbanua's arrival. A total of 34 vessels belonging to the People's Liberation Army Navy, the Chinese Coast Guard, and the Maritime Militia were discovered by the Philippines on May 12th in the vicinity of Sabina Shoal. The deployments took place at the same time that the first Chinese naval exercise was taking place in the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines, as stated by the Philippine Navy. The Philippine Coast Guard, along with civilian investigators, made the discovery on June 4th that Chinese Navy helicopters and flying unmanned vehicles were in the area. After further investigation, it was determined that the Type 071 amphibious platform dock was the vessel responsible for the launch of the vehicles that were discovered. Jay Tariella, who is the spokesperson for the West Philippine Sea National Task Force, stated that the purpose of the PLA Navy's deployment of the amphibious assault ship on June 4, 2024, was to carry out a scientific assessment at Escoda Shoal so that they could better understand the situation there. There have been reports in both Philippine and Chinese media that the deployment of Type 075 coincides with the most recent law passed in Beijing that gives the Chinese Coast Guard the authority to detain trespassers in Chinese seas for a period of up to 60 days. The Chinese state media also asserted that this was the first time that the Type 075 was used in the region that is currently under dispute. The paper from the Naval War College states that the Type 075 is capable of supporting between 900 and 1,200 personnel, in addition to the amphibious assault vehicles, flying vehicles, and helicopters that are associated with it. The Congressional Research Service report on the modernization of the Chinese Navy, on the other hand, stated that the Type 075 would be of great value for the Taiwan invasion scenario. The report also noted that the ships could be used in defensive operations to assert and defend China's claims in the south and east. Both of these statements were made in the report. Defense analyst Ben Lewis, who focuses on PLA development and Taiwan security issues, told USNI News that the Type 075 brings an important capability to Chinese forces that are seeking to bolster maritime claims. Additionally, the Type 075 demonstrates Beijing's determination to continue asserting its far-reaching territorial claims. By taking these actions, China was attempting to demonstrate that it is dedicated to its blockade activities in the region. However, it is important to keep in mind that the naval presence of the United States and the Joint Coalition Forces is also present in the region, where China aspires to establish its dominance. Let us now take a more comprehensive look at the contacts that have taken place between the navies of China and the Philippines, as well as the strategic responses of the United States and its allies, as well as the wider geopolitical, geostrategic, military, socio-political, socio-psychological, and economic consequences that have resulted from these developments. Aggression on the part of China in the South China Sea contributes to the instability of the geopolitical situation in the region. A number of regional actors, most notably the Philippines, have experienced an increase in tension as a result of China's recent naval operations in the South China Sea. The deployment of the Type 094 nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarine and the Type 075 class landing helicopter dock by the Chinese Navy in close proximity to disputed territory is evidence that Beijing intends to consolidate its influence in the region. These measures are in accordance with China's larger goal to solidify its claims to extensive maritime areas, which is in contravention of UN resolutions and the exclusive economic zones, EEZs, of nations that are geographically adjacent to China. The response of the Philippine Navy has not yet been successful in discouraging China from taking action, but the support of the United States and other allies is a significant deterrent in the region. A concerted effort is being made by the Philippines to counteract China's aggressive behavior. The recent accident that occurred between a Chinese ship and a Philippine supply vessel in the vicinity of the Spratly Islands highlights the high-risk nature of these engagements. In spite of the fact that they are facing greater Chinese naval capabilities, Philippine forces have demonstrated resilience. Manila's dedication to defending its territorial seas and upholding international maritime law is highlighted by the strategic location of the BRP Teresa Magbanua near Sabina Shoal, as well as the subsequent conflicts that ensued. With the assistance of other friends like Japan, Canada, and Australia, the United States of America is keeping a careful eye on the current situation. In order to provide a counterbalance to the maritime actions that China is engaging in, Aircraft carrier strike groups from the United States Navy have been deployed in the region. These strike groups include the USS Ronald Reagan and the USS Theodore Roosevelt. The deployments are being made with the intention of reassuring partners and discouraging additional action from China. Additionally, the United States' commitment to preserving stability and freedom of passage in the Asia-Pacific area is demonstrated by high-level diplomatic engagement with regional allies as well as joint military exercises. The naval strategy of the Philippines and the military posture of the United States in the Pacific are both vital in order to counteract the objectives and capabilities of the Chinese Navy. In recent times, the Chinese Navy has been engaging in actions that are reflective of its expanding capabilities and strategic goals. China's ability to project power and carry out amphibious operations is significantly improved by the Type 094 submarine and the Type 075 amphibious assault ship, both of which are significant assets. The presence of these ships in the South China Sea has two purposes. First, it is a demonstration of force, and second, it is a method of intimidating regional actors like the Philippines. In spite of the fact that it possesses better armaments, the Philippine Navy has responded to China's advances by utilizing strategic placement and receiving assistance from the international community. One of the most important aspects of Manila's strategy is its reliance on international diplomatic and military backing, as well as the utilization of smaller ships that are more maneuverable. In addition to attempting to generate international sympathy and support, the Philippines' attempts to chronicle and broadcast China's aggressiveness are also aimed at further complicating China's unilateral activities. The United States maintains a robust military posture in the Asia-Pacific region. The commitment of the United States of America to its allies is highlighted by the deployment of carrier strike groups and its enhanced surveillance capabilities. An example of a novel technique to countering potential Chinese attack is the Hellscape strategy, which incorporates the utilization of unmanned systems in the Taiwan Strait. The objective of this strategy is to impede and disrupt the activities of the Chinese military, so allowing for the arrival of reinforcements at a crucial moment. On the other hand, conflicts and interactions in the region have a significant impact on the stability of the region, the economy, and its position on the international stage. The aggressive moves taken by China have the effect of destabilizing the region and causing its neighbors to express severe worries. There has been an increase in the amount of money spent on military operations and the formation of strategic alliances among Southeast Asian nations as a result of the frequent confrontations and the possibility of escalation into armed war. For the purpose of bolstering its defense capabilities and discouraging any further aggression from China, the Philippines, in particular, has been pushing for tighter connections with the United States and other allies. When it comes to the Philippines, the way in which the government responds to Chinese aggression has repercussions that are both political and psychological. To a large extent, public opinion is in favor of the defense of national sovereignty, and any perceived weakness may have political ramifications. These skirmishes have resulted in injuries and casualties, which have further aroused public opinion against China and strengthened the necessity for the government of the Philippines to respond in a manner that is both powerful and decisive. The persistent conflicts in the Asia-Pacific area have a profound impact on the public and officials in the United States that are concerned about the region. With regard to the United States' foreign policy, the commitment to defend allies such as the Philippines is considered to be a crucial component. The current scenario is made more complicated by the strategic uncertainty that surrounds Taiwan's defense, which necessitates careful navigation in order to prevent an unwarranted escalation of tensions while yet offering a credible deterrence against Chinese assault. There is a substantial amount of international traffic that goes through the waterways of the South China Sea, making it an important maritime route. The aggressive efforts taken by China pose a danger to the stability of major trade routes and have the potential to bring about disruptions in world trade. These kinds of disruptions can have a significant influence on the economy, as they might potentially disrupt supply chains all over the world and result in higher expenses for transportation and insurance. A disproportionate amount of damage would be done to regional economies, particularly those that are dependent on maritime trade to a significant degree. The United States and Europe are coming closer and closer to reaching an agreement that, In reaction to China's activities, they should impose more stringent penalties on Chinese firms. These actions are being taken with the intention of reducing China's economic standing and discouraging any additional invasion of military territory. It is highly likely that the economic gap between China and Western countries, which is being pushed by strategic considerations, will continue to widen, which would have substantial repercussions for foreign trade and the stability of the global economy. The question now is, how will both parties interact with the region in the future? A call has been made by President Xi Jinping to the Chinese People's Liberation Army, urging them to be prepared to conquer Taiwan by force by the year 2027. Because of this, the United States of America, along with its regional partners, is obligated to make certain that a Chinese invasion is not successful. According to a senior official in the United States military stationed in the Pacific, this plan is dependent on the rapid manufacture and deployment of hundreds of new drones. These drones will flood the Taiwan Strait and keep the Chinese military busy until additional assistance arrives. But there is a limited amount of time left to turn these goals into a reality. In accordance with its long-standing policy of strategic ambiguity, the United States has never made a commitment to defend Taiwan in the event that China launches an attack that targets Taiwan. The Vice President of the United States, Joe Biden, has declared on several times that he would send the United States military to defend Taiwan. However, he recently added a new condition to his statement by noting that it would be contingent on the circumstances. It would appear that Taiwan's government is less likely to intervene on its behalf as a result of the fact that President Donald Trump mentioned to a Republican senator while he was in office that there was very little that they could do in the event that China launched an attack on Taiwan. If any president of the United States were to make the demand that American men and women be sent to defend a small democracy on the other side of the planet, it would be an incredibly difficult task for them to fulfill. Plan A is therefore to discourage Xi from attempting an invasion by ensuring that he never looks across the Taiwan Strait and sees no easy win. According to Admiral Samuel Papero, the new head of the United States Indo-Pacific Command, who told me in a speech that Plan A is to be implemented in such a manner. Thus, Plan A is to be implemented in this manner. They want to make it a fait accompli before the world takes action, according to Papero. Thus, they want to present the world with a battle that is brief and intense. In the background of the annual Shangri-La Dialogue, which was hosted by the International Strategic Institute, this was carried out. According to Papero, the single purpose is to ensure that the United States military and its allies will be able to win victory between the years 2027 and beyond. This is the only objective that has been established. Papero claimed that the most likely approach that China will use is to unleash a massive strike on Taiwan, with short to no prior warning. This is the most likely method that China will use. To avoid making the same mistake that Russian President Vladimir Putin made in Ukraine in 2022, when Russia's first large-scale invasion was failed and turned into a protracted war of attrition, Xi does not want to repeat that mistake. He wants to avoid making the same mistake. For the purpose of defeating President Xi's default approach, Pacific Command is of the opinion that the United States policy known as Hellscape is the most effective means of doing so. The United States military intends to dispatch hundreds of unmanned submarines, unmanned surface ships, and airborne ships to flood the area and provide assistance to the people of Taiwan as soon as China's invasion fleet begins moving down the 160 kilometers of canal that separates China and Taiwan. This will be done in order to provide assistance to the Taiwanese people. The assumption that the United States military will flood the land along the waterway is the foundation around which this plan is being constructed. Therefore, at this moment, the United States may make use of a wide array of covert capabilities in order to turn the Taiwan Strait into a zone that is swarming with drones and attempt to obstruct the efforts that China is making. On the other hand, there are a few hints that the concept for Hellscape is making progress with regard to the overall picture. The Department of Defense of the United States of America made the statement in March that it will allot $1 billion to a program that is known as Replicator, in order to construct fleets of unmanned surface ships and aerial drones for the goal of accomplishing this assignment. The Replicator program, as stated by Papero, is evidence that the United States has also received information from the fighting that occurred between Russia and Ukraine. During this conflict, Ukraine made tremendous improvements in drone technology. Concerning the supply schedule for these systems, there is a lack of information surrounding the circumstances. The assets of the United States Navy and Air Force have the potential to sustain substantial damage in the event that the drone swarms are not prepared for the attack when it takes place. They have the capacity to cause significant damage. Furthermore, it may increase the likelihood of a protracted conflict, which may eventually involve allies such as Japan, South Korea, and the Philippines. This, in turn, may lead to the possibility of a prolonged conflict. Although it is possible that Hellscape may be able to be erected in a timely manner, drone swarms on their own will not be able to compete with Beijing's massive military buildup across the strait. At a tempo that has never been seen before, the People's Liberation Army, PLA, is working to improve its capabilities in the areas of nuclear, naval, Air Force, intelligence, and electronic warfare. According to Paparo, the annual budget for China's military is roughly $700 billion, which is approximately 3 times larger than the figure that Beijing has made publicly available. This information comes from the Chinese government. In the meantime, according to a letter that Paparo's predecessor sent to Congress in March, the budget for the Indo-Pacific Command is $11 billion short of what it requires for just this year alone. This is the case for the entire year. The issue of how to pay for the defense strategy is not the only one that needs to be addressed. There is currently no reliable method that the United States military possesses for intercepting China's hypersonic carrier-killer cruise missiles. This is a problem for the United States military. It is also possible for China to launch attacks against the space assets of the United States. The delivery of the United States military supplies to Taiwan is far behind schedule. Due to this particular reason, it is absolutely necessary for the United States to receive support from coalition soldiers that are partners. The United States of America will only be able to corner the government in Beijing with the backing that it receives from the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, and the anti-China forces in the Pacific. On the other hand, in addition to these acts, what more measures can be implemented against China? In general, there is consensus that additional penalties should be imposed on China by the United States of America and several European nations. Because of the development of trade tensions between the United States and China since 2018, the Chinese policymaking community has been driven to formulate a strategy to immunize the Chinese economy against Western sanctions and boost China's financial security. This is because of the fact that the United States and China have been engaged in a trade dispute since 2018 as a result of the sanctions imposed by the G7 on Russian assets and individuals since 2022. Notably the suspension of Russian foreign exchange reserves. This situation has arisen. In spite of the pressure and sanctions that the West has applied against Russia, China continues to preserve its trading relationship with Russia. During Vladimir Putin's visit to Beijing in April of 2024, both Chinese President Xi Jinping and Russian President Vladimir Putin reaffirmed their devotion to one another. Russia's President Vladimir Putin was in Beijing at the time. When it comes to sanctions imposed by the West against Russia, Beijing is critical of them, stating that they do not have a legal basis. At the same time, Beijing is conducting a pragmatic assessment of the potential dangers associated with China's reliance on Western nations for essential resources and technology in the industrial sector. Trade between China and the West has fallen as a result of geopolitical tensions between the United States and China, as well as industrial policies established by Western governments to encourage enterprises to lessen their dependence on China for supply chain activities. These factors have contributed to the contraction of trade between China and the West. As a result, Chinese officials and scholars have been increasingly concerned about the prospect of increased separation. In an effort to avoid China from falling prey to Western sanctions in the same way that Russia did, the Chinese leadership has hastened the construction of a policy framework that opposes sanctions, as well as an alternative global system. Despite the slowdown in China's economic growth and the domestic economic wounds, the Chinese Communist Party and the Chinese government will continue to bolster their defenses against the possibility of financial sanctions from the West. This kind of determination is fueled by two primary elements. To begin, The perception of the United States as containing China necessitates China's self-sufficiency and a greater defense against the forced decoupling of its economy. In the second place, Chinese President Xi Jinping places a high priority on bolstering China's financial security as an essential component of national security and has the objective of increasing China's financial standing. The punitive economic response that the United States and its allies have taken against Russia indicates, in the minds of Chinese leaders and policymakers, that global supply chains and the global financial system that is led by the United States may be weaponized against China in severe geopolitical situations. However, the economic war against Russia as a form of retaliation for President Putin's invasion of Ukraine is not the only cause that is causing Chinese policymakers to be concerned about the possibility of trade and financial weaponization against China. Within a short period of time following the inauguration of President Biden, Chinese analysts came to the conclusion that the China policy of the Biden administration would involve containment and would generate demand for China's pursuit of economic and technological self-sufficiency. Prior to the collective sanctions imposed by the West as a form of punishment for President Putin's war on Ukraine, this occurred 1 year into the administration of Vice President Joe Biden. Academics and official media in China had the impression that the United States' approach toward China was restrictive. During the month of June 2021, for instance, Zhang Monyan, who was a major researcher at the China Center for International Economic Exchanges, a public policy think tank associated with the National Development and Reform Commission, made the observation that Biden's policy of containing China will go further than Trump's. It was written in August by the Bureau of Development and Planning of the Chinese Academy of Sciences that the focus of the 2021 U.S. Innovation and Competitiveness Act is to contain and compete with China in science and technology, focusing on digital technologies such as semiconductors and 5G. This statement was made known by the Chinese Academy of Sciences. Not only did China's major state media, Xinhua, interpret the trips to Southeast Asia by key officials in the Biden administration, such as Defense Secretary Austin and Vice President Kamala Harris, as the United States trying to influence Southeast Asia to contain China, quoting Chinese academics. This was also the case in August. The Chongyang Institute of Financial Studies at Renmin University produced a study in January 2022 that argued that containing China has become a new normal in the calculations that are used to make decisions regarding state policy in the United States. Given these circumstances, Chinese strategists are certain that the United States is intent on putting into action a full-fledged containment strategy against China prior to the imposition of punitive sanctions by the West against Russian individuals and entities. As a result of President Putin's war against Ukraine, it is only natural that Chinese authorities, academics, and media discourse are increasingly discussing the concept of self-sufficiency and making preparations for a split from the United States that is imposed against their will. Because of this, it is essential to take note of the fact that the United States of America and Europe are working together to bring about a unified purpose against China, and that they are tightening sanctions against both Russia and China. This has the potential to drive China away from the Pacific and alter the trajectory of the conflict in Ukraine by severing the connection between Russia and the government in Beijing. The rising tensions that are taking place between China and the Philippines in the South China Sea are a microcosm of the larger geopolitical and military confrontations that are taking place within the Asia-Pacific region. The high stakes involved are highlighted by China's aggressive naval operations and the Philippines' response, which is supported by the United States and its allies. In order to maintain international law and safeguard the stability of the region, this circumstance calls for a diversified approach that combines economic measures, diplomatic efforts, and military preparation. The international community, including the United States of America and its allies in particular, should continue to provide support to the Philippines and other regional countries in their attempts to counteract the aggressiveness of China. The maintenance of the power balance and the prevention of further escalation through the implementation of effective sanctions, the strengthening of alliances, and the enhancement of military capabilities are all essential stages. In order to successfully traverse the complex and possibly turbulent landscape, it will be necessary to maintain awareness and strategic vision as the dynamics in the Asia-Pacific region continue to shift. In conclusion, it highlights the complex interplay of geopolitical, geostrategic, military, socio-political, socio-psychological, and economic factors shaping the ongoing tensions in the South China Sea. A strong and coordinated response by the United States and its allies is critical to counter China's ambitions and ensure regional stability. Thank you for following us.